you guys seen the interview with Chuck Todd and Kamala Harris, whatever her name is, however you say it, however she says it? It's offensive if you say it wrong, so I don't want to say it wrong. Oh wait, I just said it wrong. Anyway, these people have gone full propaganda mode because everyone knows Kamala Harris cannot take questions and respond accordingly. She's incapable of it.
Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia.
We campaign with the plan. Uppercase T, uppercase P. The plan.
Do you plan to visit the border?
Not today. But I have before, and I'm sure I will again. I said I'm going to go to the border. And
when are you going to the border, Vice President?
The administration has asked. I'm not finished. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
I'm being clear with you right now.
Yes, okay.
And so if you're interested, I'll continue to be clear. There are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't, there's no Kinko's, there's no Office Max near them. It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. We are doing it.
But should we have done it sooner?
We are doing it.
What do you see as the biggest national security challenge confronting the U.S.? What is the thing that worries you and keeps you up at night?
Frankly, one of them is our democracy.
You don't feel misused or underused?
No, I don't. When folks vote, they order what they want, and in this case, they got what they asked for. I went off script a little bit.
You ask her a question, she's going to look like this, and she's going to start laughing and saying things that have nothing to do with the question asked. That's who she is. It's what she does. Everyone knows it. Which means if they're doing an interview, she knew the questions in advance. It's the only way she can have a coherent speaking engagement with somebody else if they're asking any kind of questions that question her or her thoughts or her job or her administration's positions. She can't do it. She's incapable. So what is this interview? This guy's clearly setting her up with biased questions, and he's doing it in a way to guide her through her own answers. Chuck Todd gave probably the most disingenuous interview I have ever seen, because in his questions, his loaded questions, comes an angle. And he gives her so many chances to get out of her, even knowing the questions in advance, she still was messing up the answers. So he would catch it and then rephrase it for her to answer it correctly. It was so bad. It was so bad. And it reminds people of why she was the first to drop out of the presidential election of 2020. During the primaries, their own primaries, the left. She lost her own state, and now you can see why. If they don't give her the questions and the answers, she will fail. She will fail in the interview. Whether it's a debate, whether it's an interview, she has to have it scripted. She talked about the insurrection. And this is the angle they're going with, and the media is helping them go with January 6th as a threat to democracy. This woman was not only a lawyer, she was a prosecutor, she was a DA. She knows the law. She literally said that they were trying to that there was a threat to democracy. She knows that's not true. It's clearly not true. She's talking about how election deniers, and Chuck Todd kind of set this up too.
Today is September 11th. It was 21 years ago that we were attacked by foreign terrorists. Not quite 20 years after 9/11, the Capitol came under attack from domestic terrorists. I began by asking the Vice President about how, over 2 decades, our focus has had to shift from foreign terror to the threat from within.
What are we doing here? All you have to do is disagree or think that something is corrupt or think that something was stolen, whether it's the election, whether it's, I don't care what it is. An idea makes you a terrorist now. That's what they're saying. She goes, and they don't even believe in the election. Like, they're deniers. She was a denier.
Elections matter. When you win an election, you get to set the rules.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's a real
what I'm
thing.
scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right. So, again, as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I will tell you that we should believe exactly what the intelligence community has told us. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right.
They talked about the polling, and 70% of the people don't believe, or at least Republicans don't believe that the election was fair and legitimate. And they act as if that's the end of the world when in 2016, the numbers were the same. The difference was the party. It's what happens every election cycle. It's what happens. The difference is there was a riot, and they were very uncomfortable with the riot. So what do? They literally compare it to 9/11. On 9/11, one person died and it was a Trump supporter. They're comparing that to the World Trade Center. Like, I don't understand this. They're comparing it to airplanes being flown into the World Trade Center, another hijacked airplane being flown into the Pentagon, and another one being taken down. That's what they're comparing? A riot of a couple hundred people going into the Capitol building. No one died. Not one shot was fired. But this is the angle that they're going to take. They're going to run with this. I don't know how they think this is going to be successful. It seems as if they really truly believe that this is going to be the winning angle here. They're going to ride this, in my opinion, to their demise. Because this is not a winning strategy to go after the American people. They're not going after a politician. They're going after the American people. Half of them. It's crazy. They're saying that the terrorism, blah. Islamofascism, blah. None of that is important. China, even Russia, It's the American citizens who don't believe we won. That's who the enemy is, according to them, not me. That's what they're saying. They're running with it. And they have media helping them. Because before the interview even started, that was his premise. That's what he laid out. We're shifting from terrorism, and then they show the Twin Towers to a homegrown threat here in America. They disagree. So you must be evil. You must be akin to terrorism. Good luck with that strategy. I don't see how that's going to work. But hey, you guys are experts. You know how this is all going to go. So she pushes that nonsense, then starts talking the abortion stuff, saying that constitutional right was taken away from women.
So much is on the line. Take, for example, the issue of choice. The United States Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision just took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the women of America, from the people of America.
There was no constitutional right to an abortion. It's just not there. She called the court an activist court because she disagreed with one of their decisions. That's all it takes to be an activist court? Supreme Court at that. Not an activist judge, an activist Supreme Court. Branch of government. Because they had disagreed with her. Not that there should be abortion or shouldn't be abortion. That it should be the federal government that decides. All they did was say, yeah, this is not a federal issue. Send it back to the states. What does she say? They just banned abortion. And they took away a constitutional right. That's not in the Constitution. How does that work? If something's not in the Constitution, how can you call it a constitutional right? It's never been a constitutional right. That's interesting. Coming from a former prosecutor who should know the law, who understands the Constitution. They were prosecuting according to it, right? This woman just lied several times. And Chuck Todd helped her through the lies. How is this accepted as journalism? Every channel should have had that interview up, and they should have been critiquing how bad the journalism was in that interview. Because you normally ask her a question, she just starts repeating words that have nothing to do with the question. That's just what she does. But in this one, she's so calm and collected and even shows concern. They're election deniers. There are candidates that are in the lead that don't even believe I won. She tried to use this tone of genuine concern.
We have always had a peaceful transfer of power in our nation. No matter our differences, no matter how bloody knuckled we've been in campaigns.
Can we say that now?
Well, certainly we were on the verge of having a very different outcome. And the injury was still an injury for which we still are experiencing the wound.
So then she gets asked, well, what's a semi-fascist? And she doesn't directly answer it. But she still alludes that it's anyone who doesn't agree with the outcome of the election.
What is a semi-fascist?
Listen, I think that let's not get caught up in politicizing the fact that most people in America know that it is not helpful to our country when we have people who are denying elections or trying to obstruct the outcome of an election where the largest number of people in our country voted for the President of the United States. And when we look at where we are, I think that we have to admit that there are attacks from within, to your first question, and we need to take it seriously.
That's what it takes to be a semi-fascist? Everything goes back to January 6th. They think repeating it over and over and over and over and over is going to work on the American population. And it will work on some people who just don't follow it. But it's not going to work in an election. Because more people know that it wasn't what you're saying it was than not. So she calls it semi-fascist is somebody who doesn't agree with the outcome of the election in which the president won more votes than the other person. 2016. She was one of the people who said Trump didn't win the election. So why is it now up for grabs? And if you call it what she called it, you're a fascist. Again, this woman was a prosecutor. She knows the law. She knows what fascism is. That's not fascism. Disagreeing with them must be fascist. You're evil. So what does Chuck Todd do? He phrases the question to try to help them smooth over blaming half the country or calling half of the country fascists. He says, hey, is that really helpful? Instead of saying, hey, why do you guys think that it's smart to insult half the country? Or do you see that as an insult? He says, I don't know if is it helpful to use that kind of language?
I think back to the president's inaugural address, and he said the following: politics need not be a raging fire destroying everything in its path. And then I think about the language construction he used with semi-fascist. And I understand the dilemma. You got to call it out in order to bring the country together. But it's hard to do both at the same time, isn't it?
He's phrasing it as if this is his best friend, and they're talking like, hey, this might not be the best strategy. He's not asking questions of a public official. He's having a conversation with an ally. Should we be saying this about them? Those people, there may be backlash. Instead of, hey, is this really the position? That people who voted for Donald Trump are semi-fascists? Is that really the language? Would you use that language if you were the president? And what does she do? She breaks into this story about how great Joe Biden is and how long he's been in office and how much he's fought for civil rights. The same guy she called a racist in the primaries. The same guy. Now she goes through his civil rights record and his voting record, and it's always been for the people.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about our president for a moment. Joe Biden has spent his entire career, it is on for all to see, working across the aisle. His whole career, sometimes he's been criticized for believing in bipartisanship, for believing in compromise, for believing in working across the aisle, finding common ground. His whole career has been that.
So then he asked her about voting. Everything he asked her, he was like, but don't you think, I don't know, we probably should be approaching this differently. It's kind of cynical. Not sure this is going to work. He's not just asking her questions. You can be friends with the person you're asking questions with, but you should at least show some kind of objective or ability to be objective.
I'm curious, when you see the Democratic Party and some parts of the party funding ads to promote some of these election deniers in primaries, whether it's Michigan, the high-profile race there, Illinois, Colorado, New Hampshire, it looks like a little bit cynical. And the president went out of his way to say there are good Republicans here. Should you leave the good Republicans alone in a primary? Is the Democratic Party making a mistake here by those people could win if you're not careful?
Listen, I'm not going to tell people how to run their campaigns. I ran in terms of statewide office.
Would you have done this? Would you have done this? Is this something you'd be comfortable with?
I'm not going to tell people how to run their campaigns, Chuck.
She starts talking about voting rights. They're really worried. I don't understand. We're trying to make it easier for people to vote. Completely ignoring the ability to be corrupt or corrupted the system. Why can't we just mail the ballots for somebody who's working 2 jobs and doesn't have time to wait 4 hours in line, as if that's real? How many people does that apply to? How many people's waiting 4 hours in line on election night? How many people have 2 jobs and don't have time to vote? How many jobs don't require the employer or management to allow time to go vote? How many times? A lot. Oh, it happens all the time. You should see how many single mothers with 6 kids who are homeless working 2 jobs don't have time to go vote. It's rampant. This is the position she took. I don't understand why people don't want other people to vote. They want you to show up on election day, which is why it's a day, and vote. Early voting should be restricted to very specific demographics because we have election day. Less time for corruption, less time to play games, less time to add and subtract ballots. Why don't they just want people to just drop their ballots in the box? We want to know who you are. Are you the person you say you are? And are you the person placing this vote? It's protecting you and protecting your vote. And it's showing, hey, we actually care about your vote so much that we want to make sure no one is taking your vote, no one is scamming your vote, no one is spamming or adding to your vote or shifting it. We're protecting you, the individual. We want to see you. We want your ID to show that it's you. What is wrong with that? How is that trying to take away people's rights to vote? It's absolutely absurd.
People realized, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, but a drop box makes it easier for me to fill out the ballot in the middle of the night and go drop it off instead of standing in line. Hey, voting by mail, especially if I have disabilities, the physical disabilities that make it more difficult for me to stand in line for 4 hours, I can vote by mail. And I think that scared some people that the American people were voting in such large numbers.
So then Chuck Todd asks her about the abortion issue, specifically about late-term abortion. He said, do you think the government should put any limitations on abortion?
Do you believe the government should put any limit on abortion?
I believe government should not be telling women what to do with their bodies. I believe government should not be telling women how to plan their families. I believe government should not be criminalizing healthcare providers.
So late-term abortion is okay. And apparently, so here's the issue with this topic. If you have a problem with the federal government regulating abortions or not, that's fine. Your alternative has to be something reasonable or rational. Meaning, at what point is it not just one person that we're talking about? Because it's very easy to say, telling a woman what to do with their body. At what point is it now 2 bodies? Because that's the issue here. It's not about a woman's body or a woman's right. It's at what point does the other being have rights and have a body? You're only talking about protecting one person in this, in the leftist utopia. It's never addressing the other body. At what point is that a body? At what point does that person have rights? That's the issue here. So some people believe it's at conception. Some people believe it's at 9 months. Some people believe if there's no arms sticking out of the woman, it's not real. Nothing's going in the trash, nothing's being killed. It's never an issue. Where do you fall? I'm good if you give me a time frame and you say, you know what? 2 months. Okay. 3 months. Okay. That's fine. I'm good with you giving me a time frame. What I'm not okay with you doing is saying at 9 months, we're still talking about just the woman's body. We're not talking about a baby's body. Because now I start to question how real you're being here, how honest you're being here. Is this really how you feel? So it's never a baby. That's what the argument should be about. Or it shouldn't even be an argument. The conversation should be, okay, at what point is it not about a woman's right to choose, but it's about 2 people? That's the only issue. Everybody has a stance. I rarely talk about this. But the reason I don't talk about it is because it's not one of those, it's not an issue that I am as passionate about. Because that's not for me, it's not a political issue. It really isn't. But if you think that the mother has rights to her body, you have to also believe at some point a baby has rights to their body. When is that point? That is the only thing that should be up for conversation. Because 9 months is not it. That's an unacceptable answer if you ask me. Why? Because I have kids. I know what a baby looks like. I can't pretend it's not real or it's a clump of cells. At some point, we need to have an honest conversation about this topic. When is that going to be? At what point is this going to be a real conversation about, okay, we're talking about two people here now. Now we need to make some hard decisions. Because if we don't ever get to that point where we're actually considering a baby, the conversation is not real. It's just politics, in my opinion. But that wasn't even the worst part of the whole interview. For me. The worst part is when he brought up immigration. And he asked her about immigration. And she said the border's secure.
Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the president and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
She kept saying, the border's secure. You're the czar who still hasn't been down to the border. Because if she had been down to the border, I guarantee you they would have recorded it and put out a press conference about it. They didn't, because she hasn't even been to the border. She insisted the border's secure, but the immigration system is broken. And he doesn't stop and say, wait a minute. You just said it's secure and it's broken? He goes, well, 2 million people for the first time ever have gotten across this year, people, 2022, this year.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix, given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years. We also have to put in place a law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship for the millions of people who are here and are prepared to do what is legally required to gain citizenship. We don't have that in place because people are playing politics.
She goes, the border's secure. That's her response. It's broken and it's secure at the same time. We just need to come up with a pathway. How many years have people been talking about a pathway to citizenship? Since Reagan? Why are we still talking about a pathway to citizenship? There is one. Should we fix that? Possibly. But can we fix that as long as 2 million people are coming across the border in less than a year? No. How do you fix it when record numbers of people are flowing through our southern border? So the strategy is to blame Americans for their shortfalls and then blame Republicans for obstructing, even though they don't have any power to obstruct anything. And then blame Trump for things that aren't going their way in the strategies that they're implementing. So when it comes to the jab, when it's good, we take full credit. When it becomes unpopular, blame Trump. That's what we're doing. Immigration, 2 million people came across, that must be Trump's fault. Well, he had record lows when he was in office. Just move on.